most historic, especially evangelical Christian churches that I have dialogued with and interacted with throughout the years, find Judaism to be incompatible with Christianity, meaning once you become a Christian, you can no longer walk the walk that is described by Judaism, which is keeping the commandments, keeping the Sabbaths, the Torah, the festivals, kosher, all of those rituals and things like that. Obviously, sacrifices can't be done anymore today because we don't have a temple, no priests, no animals. But historic Christianity has come to the conclusion that basically the New Testament has replaced the Old Testament, and that's why they're no longer incompatible with one another. They view Judaism as a religion of works and Christianity as a religion of faith. And this is also a very unfortunate stereotype that's created by modern, historic and modern Christianity, because the best historical research demonstrates that Judaism was not a religion of works like merit theology, the way we describe it. Yes, you're always going to have people who have that mindset in any religion. Even in Christianity, you still have people who think that you can earn your way into heaven by doing good works, right? There are lots and lots of Catholics around the world who think that X amount of penance are going to, an X amount of rosaries, praying to Mary and things like that are going to get you into God's heaven. So this is not exclusive to Judaism. Many, many world religions have this disease of merit theology. But by and large, what we find in the Bible is this overarching concept of nationalism in Israel, where we had this idea that as long as you belong to the people known as Israel, and as long as Abraham's your father, like John lambasted those religious leaders, you brood of vipers, who warned you against the coming judgment? The axe is already laid at the tree, laid at the root, and don't suppose that you can say that Abraham is our father, right? All of that is this Jewish nationalism that was prevalent in the first century, which supposed the idea that God cut this covenant with Israel as a group, and therefore, as long as you're in the group, you're in. There's no real focus on individual righteousness. It's a corporate righteousness, and all you have to do is maintain your place in the group, right? And don't get kicked out of the group, and then you're okay. You're okie dokie. That was the idea in the first century. It wasn't more so much what can I do to get into heaven? It's what can I do to inherit that which is already mine? What can I do to secure it? One of these days, I'm going to talk about the dialogue that Yeshua has with that rich young ruler, where he asks him, master, good teacher, what must I do to be saved? And too often we think that he's asking, what commandments can I keep to be saved? But that's not really what the dialogue is about. We'll talk about that a different day. But back to our study tonight. So are Judaism and Christianity compatible with one another? I updated this commentary 5 years, well, it's been more than 5 years ago. I wrote it near, 2015. Haven't put any really huge updates there. But look at the contents. These are the topics that we've been talking about. We introduced this idea of replacement theology, right? The idea that the church is replacing Israel as the people of God. The Torah is being replaced by the law of Christ. The New Testament is replacing the Old Testament. The New Covenant is replacing the Old Covenant. And on and on and on and on. And as a good friend of mine who's in the study with me right now is fond of reminding me, if we define Old Covenant as the old man who is sold under sin and a slave to sin because of his uncircumcised heart, his uncircumcised ears, if we define Old Covenant using that terminology, which Paul actually does in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, then we can, yes, agree that the old is truly out and that the new truly is in. And I recognize that. That's why when we get to the section titled Old Man, New Man in Messianic Judaism, we're going to highlight those facts using the proper understanding of the word Old Covenant. But that's not the way historic Christianity understands the word Old Covenant. By and large, historic Christianity defines Old Covenant as the law of Moses. And in that sense, they simply say that it is incompatible with the new Christian way of living. You can't keep the law of Moses and keep the law of Christ at the same time. But I disagree with all of those interpretations. And why would I disagree? Because the Bible disagrees. We'll get to that in a moment, possibly tonight, maybe next week. So we looked at examples from Pastor John Piper, examples from gotquestions.org, examples from Pastor John MacArthur, and then an example from Pastor David Guzik. And in all of these examples that you see on my screen right now, we found that the similar theme is repeated over and over again. The old, which is the Jewish way of life of approaching God by keeping the commandments, etc., that system is incompatible with Jesus' new way of walking by faith. It's as if to assume that to walk by Torah is not walking according to faith. That's the assumption made by these well-meaning resources that I have included in my commentary. And these are all great resources, people. Let me just stop and plug them for like 30 seconds. Do yourself a favor and bookmark the resources, the web resources of Pastor John Piper, gotquestions.org, Pastor John MacArthur, and David Guzik. They all have something in common. They're all free. I have another thing in common. They're all super duper thorough in their research. They're fantastic. I highly recommend them for your Christian walk, your Christian living, for strengthening you as a believer in Messiah. Great resources. I can't recommend them enough, right? Plus, in the case of Pastor John MacArthur and Pastor David Guzik, they have written complete commentaries on the entire Bible, right? Verse by verse on the entire Bible. That's an amazing feat, people. That's no small thing. That's a lifelong dedication to pouring yourself into the Word of God and to studying the resources that God has left for us. So bookmark those resources. Those are great resources. So I'm not slamming them.